Hello, web scripting class, CTEC-149. My name is Keyvan Shahrdar. I'm an adjunct professor of computer science at Bossier Parish Community College. If you need further assistance, feel free to give me an email, send me an email at kshardar@bpcc.edu, or you could text or call me at 318-453-8082. Let's go ahead and get started with our presentation. This is an introduction. Obviously, this will be an online class. I will be checking the activity on a daily basis. You will have quiz and assignments from on Canvas that you need to get done. And as you know, your first assignment was to introduce yourself. So I'm hoping everybody did that already, and you will be getting a grade for that. In this presentation, we're going to talk about JavaScript. So it's an introduction to JavaScript. In this chapter, you will study the history of the World Wide Web. You will learn about web development, add basic JavaScript code to your web pages, learn about the JavaScript programming language, and add structure to your JavaScript programs. So let me give you a brief introduction into the World Wide Web. So in 1962, memos by J.C.R. Lichter, they sort of created the first blueprint for what is the internet today. In 1960s, they had what's called ARPANET. It was the first internet implementation. It was developed by ARPA, Advanced Research Project Agency, from the U.S. Department of Defense. In 1990 and 91, and I remember this vividly because I lived through it, that was sort of like the beginning of the World Wide Web. It was created by Tim Berners-Lee, and it had hypertext linking, which is a method of accessing cross-referenced documents. And you've used hypertext linking on the web, and I'm sure every single time you click something and it takes you to another page, that's hypertext web linking. The web and the internet, they're not synonymous. So the web is actually getting access to websites inside of the super highway that's called the internet. Hypertext link or hyperlink is a reference to a specific web page. You click to open the page. A web page is a document on the web. It's identified by the Uniform Resource Locator, or URL, and it has a unique web address. And we will delve into this just a little bit more. Right now, you're really used to typing in like maybe www.yahoo.com or google.com. Well, there's a number behind that, and that's called an IP address. So we go into this public IP addresses and it gets us to those web addresses. We also have the Uniform Resource Identifier, or URI. Many types of names and addresses on the web. So a website is a location on the internet. It contains web pages and related files belonging to a company, organization, or individual. A web browser is what you use. So most people nowadays, they use the Chrome browser, the internet browser from Microsoft, which is, I think it's called Edge now. And there's others such as Firefox. And one of the earliest ones was, well, we'll talk about it later in this presentation, but that was one of the first ones that came out. So that story is quite interesting. We also have what's called a web server. This is what hosts the actual web pages. It's a computer delivering web pages. It handles requests and provides responses. So everything that you do, you actually have a request. So you send it from your laptop or your desktop or your phone. You're sending a request somewhere out there. And wherever that request gets sent, it sends a response. Just keep that in mind. The NCSA Mosaic that was created in 1993 by the University of Illinois. It allowed web navigation using a graphical user interface, or GUI. Netscape Navigator, that was the first browser that came out. It was in 94. Actually, it was a little before then that you could actually get access to it. It was released by Netscape. Soon it controlled 75% of the market. Then Microsoft Internet Explorer released their version of the browser in 1996. And there was a big hoopla because the Internet Explorer was included in all of the versions of Windows. So back then it was Windows 95, and then it came Windows 98. So there was a class action suit to make sure that browsers, that people had access to different browsers, and that Microsoft didn't corner the market. So let's understand web browsers just a little bit. Browsers war began over DHTML. That's dynamic hypertext markup language. It's a forced web industry to rapidly develop and adopt advanced web page standards. In 1994, the World Wide Web Consortium, or the W3C, was established. It oversees web technology standard development, adopted Internet Explorer versions for DHTML, and the loyal Netscape followers defected to Microsoft. So that's where sort of that vacuum began. And then Firefox, which was an open source browser, it now controls about 16% of the browser market. Internet Explorer controls about 7%, and the Google Chrome browser controls about 44%. And Safari, which is the Mac browser, or the Apple browser, it's 30%. So hypertext markup language, it's a markup language that has a set of characters or symbols defining a document's logical structure. And we will go over this, and you will see how actually it works. Based on an older standard generalized markup language, so SGML. So here are some basic HTML syntax. So you have tags, so those are formatting instructions. They determine how data is displayed on the web page. Then you have elements, which are tag pair and any data it contains. Element content, information contained in elements, opening and closing tags. Empty elements do not require a closing tag. Root element contains all of the elements in a document. So for example, head is it's a root element that you put in the top of the web page. And this information is used by the browser to denote, so they know, hey, this is the head area, and this is where we're going to have some information in there about the page. And then you have the document body, and this is where the element and the text and elements it contains. So this is where all of the information that you really see on your screen, that comes from the body area. So here are some of the elements. So /B, that's to bold, to actually see bold type on the page. Body is what's enclosed inside of the HTML document. BR, that stands for line break. So let's say you want to have a line break after a sentence, then you put a BR. Center allows you to center whatever you type. Head is an enclosed page header and contains information about the entire page. So that goes to in the top of the page. And then you have the HN. So that's really like H1, H2, H3. It goes all the way to H6, and those are headers. So that indicates a header element that you have. And HR is a horizontal rule. So if you ever go to a web page and then you see just a line that goes all the way across, that's an HR. And HTML is the beginning and end of the HTML documents. And then you have documents like I for italics, or to insert an image, you use HTML, you say image, and SRC is the source, where the source is. So the source could be on the server itself, or it could be a URL to somewhere else. And then the ALT is the alternate text. Actually, what that does is you could actually have some type of name to that image. So that way, if the image doesn't render, a name will appear. Slash P is for paragraph, slash U is for underline. And this here gives you a really good example of how code is. So you see how head, you have all this information in there. And all of this is inside of an HTML. So you have HTML, and then you have your head, and this is just tells the browser, hey, where content type, the title of the page is X Fitness Center, and that would actually appear up here in the top of your browser. So that's where the title would appear. And then here it's linking css.css. So, and I'll go over this into detail later during the class as we get to it. But this is so you could actually have nice formatting on your web page. And then here it's telling the body will have a left margin of 0 and a top margin of 0. That means go all the way to the left and all the way to the top. And you have a table. So here we're creating a table. And this is not, these things are not mandatory, but for this specific web page, it's actually using a table where it's going to render information. So creating an HTML document, so you have text editors such as Notepad or WordPad, or a word processing application capable of creating simple text files. HTML editors, they have them such as Adobe Dreamweaver and Microsoft Expression Web. If you are a software developer, like for example what I do, you would actually have an IDE, something similar to Visual Studio, and that's what this here is. So for example, and this is some HTML code that we would use, and then we have a div, and then we have this in the class of Jumbotron. Well, so we're able to call Jumbotron, but this Jumbotron would be in our CSS file, and that would actually create a specific type of screen in order for us to view. Well, I'll get back to this later. We have it's a expression web. It's a graphical interface allowing immediate view of the results. It automates process of applying elements and may add many unfamiliar elements and attributes to the document. So you also are working with XHTML and well-formed web pages. So extensible hypertext markup language, or XHTML, was sort of the next generation of web pages that came out in 2015. But ever since, well, before then, but in 2015 it was replaced with HTML5, which sort of allows you to have all this really nice, fancy ability to create the web pages. And you have user agents. So, and it's an application retrieving and processing HTML and XHTML documents. Cannot process HTML elements handling data, display, and formatting, for example, in mobile phones and PDAs. So let's do a little introduction into web development. So your web page design, or web design, it's a visual design and creation of documents appearing on the World Wide Web. So your web page authoring, which is called web authoring, it's actually, you're able to have the creation and assembly of the tags, attributes, data, and markup language in a web page. So they use this, search engines use this, so they could better rank the web pages. So you have web development, or web programming is to design of software applications on a website. So you could use all HTML, but as you're learning here, you're going to learn JavaScript. You might also learn PHP, and these are server-side languages that allow you to sort of manipulate the data that's coming out, so you could have it whichever way you want it to come out. So web browsers contain commands to view underlying HTML code. It's only viewed to improve skills. So there are two-tier systems, such as the client and the server. The server, or the back end, usually has a database. So a database allows you to store information in sort of a file ranking way. And In another course, you'll probably learn about SQL, or sequential query language. And this will give you the ability to store data and to call that data so you could serve it to the web page. And then you have the client or front end, and that's responsible for the user interface, gathers information from user, submits information to a server, and receives the format, presents results returned from the server. And this is a good example, as you have a client here and then you have a server. Now, this server is going to have what's called a web server software inside of it. So for Microsoft, it usually is IIS. If you have a Linux server, you'll probably have Apache or Tomcat. There are literally hundreds of different types of web servers out there that people use, and they do different things. So the web built on a two-tier client server system, requests and response. So obviously you have a request. So if you type in www.google.com, that's a request. And then the server sends you a response back. Hey, here's the web page. Then if you click something, that's a request, and then the server responds to that request. And this is a more multi-tier type system where you have the client and then you have the processing tier. So this is where the web server is actually handled, but the data storage is handled somewhere else. So let's say if you go to, let's say, the target.com website, you're going to go to the web server and it's going to start serving you all these different web files and images, while the images might be stored here. So it knows, hey, we have a client, they want to get access to some of the products that we have. So it's able to serve that by going to the data storage tier and putting it in the processing tier. And that way the client is able to see it. Here we have JavaScript and client-side scripting. So these are static web pages, cannot change after browser renders them. HTML and XHTML produce static documents. And JavaScript allows web page authors to develop interactive web pages and sites. Client-side scripting language runs on local browser. Okay, the scripting engine executes scripting language code, and scripting host, it's a web browser containing the scripting engine. So when you have JavaScript, and that's going to load on your web page, and actually it's going to consume the power of your desktop or your laptop. So let's talk a little bit about the JavaScript history. First introduced in Navigator, and it was known as LiveScript. This is way back in the 90s. And Navigator 2.0 name changed to JavaScript 1.0. Microsoft released Internet Explorer 4.0, and they had their own version of JavaScript, which was called JScript. The ECMA script is an international standardized version of JavaScript. Most recent version is the edition 3. So there are some limitations to JavaScript, because if you think about it, it could be very dangerous. And when it first came out, this was a favorite of the hackers. So it cannot be used outside the web browser. There's no mechanism for creating a network connection or accessing a database. So what this means is, like, if you have your desktop, you cannot access a database on your desktop from just going to a web page. Now, you could access a database sort of in a different way through JavaScript, and that's when you actually go into what's called a controller inside of some type of application that is on the actual web server. So there is a way to get access to the database, but it's a little more complex. But this is more on the client side. So this is what they're talking about, and cannot run system commands or execute programs on a client. So this is for your security, so to make sure that JavaScript is not used by hackers. And then you have the server-side scripting language executed from a web server. It's popular languages such as PHP, ASP, and JSP. There's other languages out there that that it works with as well. Can develop interactive websites to communicate with a database. The server-side scripting language limitations is cannot access or manipulate a web browser, cannot run on a client tier. So let's talk a little bit more about this so you could get a better understanding. So for example, PHP, you might have it loaded on a server. So you're going to have this PHP script request. And this PHP, what it will do is it will be able to render web pages according to that script. So the scripting engine within the web server interprets and executes the server-side scripting code and translates the results into HTML or XHTML. That's how that would work. You should use client-side or server-side scripting. Should you use client-side or server-side scripting? General rule of thumb, allow clients to handle user interface processing and light processing, such as data validation. And what's data validation? So let's say if you type in your date of birth, well, we want to validate that that's a date of birth. So, you will have some scripting in there put in place to validate that that's your date of birth or your social security number, etc. Have the web server perform intensive calculations and data storage. So you see, so on the client side, you want to keep everything light because you want everything to be as fast as possible. Now on the back side, because these web servers, they're powerful, they're very have a lot of memory, a lot of storage, a lot of CPU power, so they could handle more than a regular desktop or laptop. It's important to perform as much processing as possible on the client. So adding JavaScript to your web pages is the basic procedures used for adding JavaScript to web pages. So you first have to have a script element. You add the script element, and then inside of that element tells the browser that the scripting engine must interpret the command it contains. The type attribute, so it tells the browser which scripting language and which version of the scripting language will be used, not used much more. So understanding JavaScript objects. So an object is a programming code and data, and it's treated as an individual unit or component. Then you have procedures, individual statements used in a computer grouped into logical units, used to perform specific tasks. And then there are methods. These are procedures associated with an object. Now, there's a lot to take in at this time, but that's okay. So just listen to it, just learn about it at this time, and then as we get into JavaScript, you will understand more and more of these things. Then you have a property, which is a piece of data associated with an object, and you assign value to a property using an equal sign. You have arguments. It's information that must be provided to a method. So we'll talk about a method. And then you have passing arguments, providing an argument for a method as well. So, for example, if you want to use write or write line, so you use what's called the document object. So it's document.write or document.writeLine. It represents content of a browser's windows, creates a new web page text with the write method or the writeLine method of the document object. Both methods require a text string as an argument, text string or literal string, text contained within double or single quotation marks. So writeLine, and then you have this parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, you're going to have this quotation marks, either single or double. And then a method adds a line break after the line text, but not of HTML code. That's if you do a write line. But if you just do a write, it doesn't add a line break. And here you could see how it would look. So here, obviously, here's your script. So this is where you start your script, and then here it's of type text JavaScript. So you could actually add a type to it. And then here you could write a line that says United States national motto, and then you write a line, and then it's EM, in God we trust. Okay, and then you finish the script here, and this is what you would get. So EM would sort of would italicize the message, and we could actually do something like that now. So let me bring this here. So here I have all these, information in here. But I'm going to actually delete this right here, right? And I wrote a function. So here's the script. And then there it had type equal, and then it said text slash JavaScript. Oops, text.html. Let's do text slash JavaScript. Let's see, type equals text slash JavaScript. Okay, so we have text JavaScript in here, and then we want to write this. So we want to say when the document is ready, that means when the page is served, I want you to type, you could put in here whatever information you want. So let's do something similar to this right here. United States national motto, in God we trust. So let's do that. United States national motto. So let's add another, and then here we are going to say EM, and then slash EM, in God we trust. And then we are going to run this. And this is the web page that is being delivered. It's called default.aspx. Again, I'm using Visual Studio, so it depends on what you are using. You might be using a different type of browser, and that's okay. You might be using a different IDE. There's one that you could download, which is called PHP Storm. And then here you see United States national motto, in God we trust. But as you can see, it's all in one line, so we want to make sure that it's in two different lines, and we did do right line here. So United States national motto, God we trust. So here, that's we got a BR. Save this. And then that BR, put it to the second line there. The right line is supposed to do it, so this is something I probably have to look into a little bit more. Let me shut this off so it doesn't take too much resources. All right, so there we go. JavaScript is case sensitive, so remember you are actually programming. If you mistype something, it's not going to work. So within JavaScript code, object names must always be all lowercase. Adding comments to a JavaScript program. So you could add comments, so non-printing lines placed in code containing various types of remarks. So like a line comment, you could do with 2 slashes. That's for a single line of code. Block comments, you actually start with like a slash star, and then you end it with a star slash. So that will comment it that way. So writing basic JavaScript code is learn how to write basic JavaScript code. You start with variables. So what are variables? They're values a program stores in computer memory. And you're assigning a value to a variable, same as storing a value in a variable. So assigning variable names. So you have an identifier. It's name assigned to a variable. Rules and conventions must begin with an uppercase or lowercase ASCII 2-letter $, or underscore. Okay? And ASCII is a standard that we use in the computer world for typing, but we could get into that some other time. Can use numbers in an identifier, not as the first character. Cannot include spaces in an identifier. Cannot use reserved words for identifiers. So that's one of the things that you have to be careful with JavaScript. You cannot use a reserved word. What's a reserved word? Well, you know, write line is a reserved word for document. So make sure that when you have an identifier that you're using something that's unique. Reserved words, you know, they're special words. They're part of the JavaScript language syntax. For example, here are some of the reserved words that you cannot use. So you have to stay away from this because if not, you're going to get errors when you try to use them. Declaring and initializing variables. So use reserved words like var or var to create a variable. So for example, var my variable. You could actually give it a value as well. So you could say var variable name equals value. So the assignment operator, that's what you use one equal sign to. It assigns value on the right side of the expression to the variable on the left side of the expression. So think of it as a way to temporarily give the value that you give. So maybe this is the value 10. So if you say this, then this variable name, which could be any name. So it could be age, right? So the variable could be var age equals 10. So that means age is equal to 10. Assigning a literal string value to a variable. So another thing is you could actually assign it a string value. So if you would put quotation marks and you could say age and then 10, T-E-N in quotations. And that would be a string value that you added to it. So you pass variables to write or write ln. So the write ln is supposed to put an automatic line to it. But here you can see how we're adding variables like var sales total equals 47.58 and var shipping equals 10 and var grand total equals, and then we add the sales total plus the shipping. And now the grand total has that value of the total, which is 57.58. And you can write that document in here and you'll see that actually show up. So let's do this real quick so you guys could understand that. So here, right, so let's say we're going to say var, what is it? What is that? We're calling it. Oops, did I just lose the PowerPoint? I sure did. Just give me a second. Let me bring it right back up and we'll be a little bit shape real quick. So here, so this is what we want to do real quick. So sales total and shipping, and you see how total is capitalized. So that's what's called camel case. So That's how you want to type your variables. So sales totals and shipping, and then grand total. So let me bring that up here. Var sales total equals 47.58. Var shipping equals $10, and then var grand total equals sales total, right? Sales total plus shipping, and that's shipping. You see, shipping. So now grand total has this value in there. So we could now here say the grand total, or let's say grand total of the purchase is, right? And then we're going to do a dollar sign here. We're going to concatenate, and we're going to put grand total there. So let's see how it comes out. And there it is, 57.58. The grand total of the purchase is 57.58. So you see how that came out there. So that's JavaScript for you. So that was a little JavaScript code that we created. So assigning variable names, so you could modify variables. You could change a variable's value at any point in a script. Use a statement including the variable's name followed by an equal sign and followed by the value to assign to the variable. And so here you could see it that sales totals 47.58, and then the shipping, and then you could add them both together and then get them to display inside of the web page. So you see, so you'll display what the total is and what the total with shipping is. So you could do that as well. So building expressions. So you have expressions which are literal value or variables, or a combination of literal values, variables, operators, and other expressions. It's evaluated by JavaScript interpreters to produce a result. The operands are variables and literals contained in an expression. The operators are the symbols used in an expression to manipulate the operand, such as the plus sign, the minus sign, or the multiplication sign, or the division sign. And the literal is the value such as a literal string or a number. You have events, specific circumstance monitored by JavaScript. Test scripts can respond in some way, allows users to interact with web pages. Common events, actions users perform. Can also monitor events not resulting from user actions. So here you have a board. So a board means, so you're inside of some type of loop that you have inside of JavaScript, and you could abort it so you could get out of it. Blur allows you to sort of, when you're clicking over it, and then it will blur that element, or such a radio button becomes inactive. Click, the user clicks an element once. Change, the value of an element, such as a text box, changes. So if somebody's typing something, you could actually get that information, and okay, he's typing something. I want you to do something while he's typing. An error, that's an error occurs when a document or image is being loaded. Focus, an element such as a command button becomes active. And then you have mouse out, mouse over, reset, select, submit, unload. So you have a lot of these elements that work in JavaScript. So working with elements and events associated with XHTML elements, and then you have the event handler. It's a code that executes in response to a specific event. So if you are going to click on a radio button, so you want something to occur if that happens. So JavaScript code for an event handler contained within the quotation marks following the name of the JavaScript handler. And so you could understand better. So, you have this element. Well, all of this events don't work for all of the elements. They work for specific elements. And this is a great little matrix here. So you could actually see where is it that they work. Because a lot of times programmers, they might want to use an on key up when they're using some type of selection or something else and it's not working. Well, that's because it's not meant to work that way. So you have to understand when a specific event is able to work. And it works in an A tag, an image element, or an A element, or a body element, or a form element, etc. And so this is more for understanding events. Referencing web page elements. Append element names to the name for any elements in which it is nested. Start with the document object. Specific element properties appended to the element name allows for the retrieval of information about an element or the ability to change the values assigned to its attributes. So adding JavaScript code to a document must follow certain rules regarding placement and organization of the code. So including a script element for each code section. So for example, you want to have this script right here, and then you could have a second script right there. So this is a way that you could do it as well. You could just have one script for both, but you could have them separate as well. Element placement varies. So can place in the document head or document body. A statement in a script rendered in the order in which they appear in the document. So that means up and down, left to right. So if you have a script first, that script will run before any other script runs. General rule, place as much JavaScript code as possible in the document head. Important, if code performs behind the scenes tasks required by script sections located in the document body. External files containing JavaScript code, usually designated by the JS file extension, can legally have any extension. Contains only JavaScript elements, no script element or no HTML elements, and use the source attribute of the script element. So the advantages is neater code, code sharing, ability to hide JavaScript code from incompatible browsers, and can use embedded JavaScript code and JavaScript source files compilations. So basically, you're calling your JavaScript code from within a file that is hidden. Validating web pages. So validating parser checks for a well-formed web page, verifies document conforms to a specific DTD, and the validation, the process of verifying a well-formed document and checking the elements in your document. Web development tools offer validation capabilities. Validating services found online like W3C markup validation services. So some of the web pages, you will actually see this in the web page. So in summary, hypertext linking allows linking opening of web pages. HTML replaced by XHTML replaced by HTML5. Web built into a two-tier client-server system, JavaScript programming language allows for interactive web pages and sites. So that concludes the slide show that we wanted. So this is your lesson 1 project. You write a short web page with a JavaScript document write method in the body that prints out some message such as, "Hello from Yellowstone, I'm trapped in a tree and can't get out," and attach that HTML file below. So you could attach that here. And here I sort of show you how to get that done here. So if you have an IDE, make sure you download one, PHP Storm, and let me type it here. It's PHP Storm, STORM.com. So if you go there, you could actually download this IDE. And if you put in your student email address in there, it's for free. So give that a try, and you could use that or use any other method that you have that will work fine as well. All right, so have a great day. If you do want text, if you need help, don't hesitate to contact me. Send me an email. You could email me at kshardar@bpcc.edu. You could send me a message. You could call me. You could send me text, and I'll be more than happy to help you. With that said, have a great day, and I'm looking forward to your homework assignment.